So as he said, I'm Emily Altman. What I do most days is couples therapy. I own a private practice called the Couples Workshop. You too?
No. I was saying we're going.
Oh, okay, great. Well, great, I'm glad. So, anyway, I was like, what a small world. So, every day I'm able to work with clients in my care. And of course, a big focus of that is happiness. And it's just an easy transition for me to think about how that can apply to my business, to your businesses. So before I jump in, I kind of want to know who I'm talking to. So if you just want to take a quick 15 seconds, tell everybody who you are. We're small enough we can get to know one another today. So tell us what you do, where you're at in your business, if you're just starting, if you're scaling. Tell us a little bit about yourself. So why don't you go ahead and start?
Name's Kevin. I'm recently out of corporate America. I'm taking some time. I'm going to take basically the rest of this year, figure out what business I'm going to start, and
Cool.
make it a super methodical process, and hopefully all the way to success.
Smart.
Got a couple different options, but trying to figure out which one to go with.
Cool. Smart.
I'm Danley. I'm Vice President of a community management company here in Fort Collins. We're starting to get a little bit bigger. I've been coming to this for years and learning so much over time, and so but we are growing, and there's always growing pains with that. I do business development specifically, so trying to keep our clients happy and bring in new ones is always a goal.
Great. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. My name's Lauren. I work for a company called Hope Media. And we basically have a bunch of faith-based membership sites that are focused on serving people in individual careers. Like therapists, entrepreneurs. It started with writers. And so we just connect people in community and provide practical teaching, kind of like this, to further their work. So
Wonderful.
yeah, and then I'm the finance and HR director.
Great. Thanks for being here.
I'm Ben. I have a background in nonprofit. I've been working the last few years in construction, but I'm looking to get back into sort of supporting startup nonprofits or entrepreneurs in their journey.
Cool.
I'm Terry, and most of my career has been in IT, information technology and computers and things like that, but I'm looking really to pivot back into more technical training because I'm missing people, tired of talking to computers, although maybe AI will be more interesting, but still, I'm missing the human contact,
Oh, sure.
Yeah, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm Sam, and I own a small manufacturing company that makes supplements for mostly the equine market.
Great. So, as I said, today we're going to be talking about happiness in businesses, the happiness ratio, and of course your stakeholders. So to start this exploration, we're going to talk about stakeholders. At least in my opinion, it's a little easier to define. Stakeholders is anybody who's got some skin in the game, right? So I think of investors, I think of yourselves, I think of your management team, your employees, your customers, the community, and even your families, anyone who would be impacted by either the success or challenges faced by your business. In thinking about happiness though, at least in my career, when I ask people about happiness, they kind of talk about experiences. They talk about an upcoming trip that they're excited about. They talk about, hopefully, finding time on the weekend or sometime in the year to take time for themselves. In talking about happiness, sometimes people talk about their people who they care about, their loved ones, their children. Sometimes they talk about a big event, like a wedding. Here's my wedding. Welcome to it. They talk about that day. So perhaps it's a wedding, perhaps it's the day that their children were born. People will also talk about happiness as far as success, achieving some kind of accomplishment. They talk about how their business is doing. So right now, about 90% of my clients are business owners, and they come back to this. They talk about their teams. Sometimes though, they even talk about that moment. They think about that moment that they were most proud. So a lot of times they talk about when it all started, their why. So in thinking about defining happiness, it's challenging because we almost have to put these contingencies on it. We have to talk about like when we feel it. Sometimes people talk about happiness with that dopamine release. That feels so nice when I can finally just relax. All of these though don't quite define happiness. So for that, when I think about defining happiness, I instantly go to the field of positive psychology. Positive psychology was created in the 1980s, and through this they're saying, okay, what is the human experience? That's kind of how I sum up the field in itself. Perhaps we don't have to label things as a problem as much, but more of our experiences. So naturally, a field of positive psychology, they've done a ton of research on happiness. So decades and decades of research. This is what they've come down to the experience of happiness. It all comes down to this quadrant. So to start this exploration of happiness in your business, we're going to start in the upper left quadrant of happiness. People in this box talk about happiness as, today it is what it is. I'm going to put in the grind, I'm going to put in the hard work, and I'm going to achieve this goal. And when I finally achieve this goal, then I'm going to have that happy moment. It's like if-then type situation. The problem with this quadrant, as far as happiness is concerned, is it's a fleeting feeling. It lasts short term. Actually, what's defined in this experience is more of relief instead of happiness. So if your stakeholders are talking about happiness as far as accomplishing a goal, it's not sustainable. It's not going to be lasting for them. Second quadrant we're going to look at for the sake of completion is the bottom left square. Detriment to both today and tomorrow. If you have stakeholders who talk about this quadrant, naturally they're not talking about happiness at all. Instead, what they're talking about is hopelessness. We're going to touch on this really briefly because it's important for you to know where they're at. If your stakeholder is talking about hopelessness, then they're not at a place to talk about happiness at all. If they're talking in this quadrant, then it's more like, there's high turnover. Things are overwhelming. I don't know if my job is secure. What's going on here? They're questioning their business. They're questioning their role in your business. So in thinking about this, I think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Have you guys heard of this pyramid before? So it's the same in your system. It's the same in your business. You are not going to be able to touch on the top of the pyramid if the bottom is not strong. So thinking about how you can solidify security within your company if you have stakeholders in this quadrant. That's not what we're going to talk about today, though. Let's go back to happiness, right? So for the next quadrant, the bottom right, it's living for the weekend. That I'm going to live in the moment and I'm going to sacrifice down the line. What this looks like in business, I instantly think of the stereotypical car salesman. Sorry if you know anybody who's a car salesman, but stereotypically, right, it's like, okay, I'm gonna sell this lemon of a car in order to get my sales goal. Who cares if they don't come back? It's about the moment. I also think about businesses who have pizza parties all the time. That's like, let's take it easy, let's have fun, let's enjoy each other's company. Let's just live for today. The problem with this pattern in your business, as far as happiness is concerned, is again, it's not sustainable. That each day or each turnover of this pattern, it's like we have to keep filling it up. This is instantly what I think of this dopamine piece. That it feels good in the moment, it's not going to sustain us. So naturally, by process of elimination, I'm sure you can gather that happiness is based on a present feeling and the future. That what I'm doing today feels good, and I know I'll feel good when I also accomplish a goal. What does this look like, though? Research talks about this as meaning. That what I'm doing today has a purpose. That what I'm doing has value, and it will help me feel happy today, and I'm confident that it's going to bring happiness in the future. This is backed by decades and decades of research that happiness is actually tied to meaning. When you think about this quadrant, though, I don't want you to think that it means that we can't also put in some work. So some studies that stood out to me about the importance of work. The first is a study from 2009. I call it the Matrix study. They don't call it that. It helps me remember it. They created a Matrix-like study where they had participants come in and they said, what if every day you had happiness, that every day you had joy, it was peaceful, just easygoing, not a worry in the world? In order to guarantee that experience, though, we have to protect you. We have to put you in this virtual reality, so you're kind of hooked up to a computer. But don't worry, you won't know. You're just going to have the feeling of joy. So 77% of participants said, nah, I don't think so. Not for me. A follow-up study then said, well, why? Like, what does this mean? And it's talking about work, that I can feel happy and purpose in the work that I do. So this sentence was from a participant, and it really stood out to me about the study. I am able to do my work because my strengths can be utilized to overcome the challenge. So it's not the fact that I'm not working that brings joy, that brings purpose. It's the fact that I am working and I'm confident that my strengths can meet the challenge. So it's about purpose in work. So all of this is coming back to happiness. When people have this experience, they self-report, yeah, I'm happy. I put in the work, yeah, things feel good. I'm doing this for a reason. So through positive psychology, they define happiness as meaning in my actions and fulfillment of my values. When people have this experience, they will self-report being happy. So what does that mean for your business though, right? Like happiness sounds great. Now what? Research has shown time and time again that happiness and success have a reciprocal relationship. So people that are happier tend to have more success in their life. People who have more success tend to be happier, and it can keep feeding and feeding one another. On top of that, it actually spreads through multiple life domains. So you'll see success and happiness in work, you'll see success and happiness in relationships, in their health. They'll have successful incomes all across all life domains. So the importance of having this in the workplace, not only can you have a culture where your stakeholders are happy, it also leads to increased success. So it's actually a win-win experience. I've talked a lot about the research, so I want you to have access to it. The first is a book by Mark Seligman. Mark Seligman is the creator of positive psychology. He's still doing research today. I highly recommend the book. I brought it with me if you'd like to see it after the presentation. The second group of people, they have put a lot of research into happiness in general. They're the ones who do like follow-up studies. So they did the matrix and then the follow-up stuff. That's kind of their theme. The last group is really targeted on happiness in the workplace. So any statistics I've talked about specifically in the workplace, they're like killing it as far as the research for that. So I highly recommend following up with them. Without further ado then, let's talk about the happiness ratio. So the happiness ratio is 20-1. So that means I have 20 times more experiences full of meaning and purpose in my life to every challenge, to just kind of like that blah moment. So what's it like for you to see the 20-1 ratio?
That seems really high.
That seems really high.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
Very common response. And even if I work with clients and talking about happiness, they have the same thing. And I think in part, it seems high because we think about those moments of bliss. We think about a definition of happiness as the freeing moments. the time just with family in the mountains on that trip. So this is why it's important and why I've spent all this time talking about the definition of happiness. The more we can implement meaning and purpose in our actions, the more we can put the power in our intent of thinking about it, the more likely we're going to meet that ratio. If, though, we're in one of the other quadrants, it's going to be really hard to sustain it and to have the 20-to-1 ratio. Excuse me. And you're going to have tips to help you with that. Okay. So the 20-to-1, the 1 is also important. The 1 is impacted by the stress ratio, so this is why I've added it here. The stress ratio is 5-to-1. So that means in stressful situations, if I can handle it, that my strengths can overcome it, perhaps I've learned lessons along the way, I can reflect on it, it went okay, then it's not going to impact the happiness ratio. If, though, those moments are chaos, it's overwhelming, it's too much, then it can impact the happiness ratio. So while my suggestion is for you to focus on happiness in your businesses, if the stressful situations aren't handled properly, your stakeholders still may say, this isn't quite right.
So the 5-to-1, is that if you're experiencing 5 stressful things for 1 happy thing, or if you're having 1 stressful thing for every 5 happy?
It's how I handle the stress. So if I'm in a stressful situation and I leave and it's like, yeah, that was great, I handled that really well, I'm proud of the way I handled that, then it's not going to impact the happiness. It's how I manage stress. Does that make sense?
If you have
No,
more
but that's
chaotic stress happening, then that ratio. So at least for every 6 things, 5 of them were, okay, I handled that pretty well, and 1 was chaotic, then you're gonna be good. But if it was, no, we had 2 chaotic things and then 5 good things, then it's worse.
Yeah, so it's a little complicated when they're together because we automatically want to throw them right together. Yeah, it's like how it goes. Can I still find meaning in the challenge? Do I have confidence in myself? Do I leave it feeling like we handled that okay? It's kind of like the afterwards, how it went. Any other questions about the ratios? Okay. So to help you meet that 20-to-1 ratio, I have 3 tips for increasing happiness. The first tip is valuing strengths. To do this well for your stakeholders is twofold: that they feel authentic in their role and that they can take ownership of the work that they do. So perhaps I think about for this one, like let's say a manager perhaps, and they feel authentic in a leadership role, they're excited about the work that they do, and they have full control over whatever project. They're more likely to say that they're satisfied in that role and to take that up another notch. We want to solidify the strengths that you see in the stakeholder. The way that you can do that is through continued learning opportunities, perhaps even having a budget for books or something that somebody can buy. A way to say, yes, I feel authentic in my role, I can take ownership of that role, and I'm continuing to grow in that role. Hello. The second tip I have for increasing happiness is to create a flow state for each stakeholder. A flow state is being mindful of each stakeholder's skill level and the task difficulty at hand. If your stakeholder has too much difficulty in their task and the skills don't match it, they're going to report being anxious. So we either want to decrease the task at hand or increase the skill level, or they're going to say, man, I'm bored in this job, I'm overqualified for this. Naturally, if your stakeholder's here, you can't decrease your skill level, so it's being mindful of the task at hand. What's really important though about the flow state is actually that it's matched. Again, based on the research of fulfillment, it's that yes, I have difficult tasks at hand, but I know that I can accomplish it. I know that my strengths can meet or exceed this challenge. So being mindful not to have somebody stagnant in this graph, to still have some progress towards obtaining higher skill levels and more tasks. So for this to go well, you want to have regular checks on levels of anxiety and boredom. My recommendation is 2 to 3 times per year. And in my opinion, I think this is a quick check-in. It's not anything formal. It's saying like, hey, what are you overwhelmed with in your role today? What do you wish you could have more of? A quick question. It doesn't have to be something major. If though you have a stakeholder who maybe is more critical of a role, then you probably want to up this to 3, 4. Kind of depends on your business and where they're at. To do this at its best, it's not just checking in on the flow state, but challenging it. A big key to creating a flow state is the fact that it's an arrow, that there's progress through it. The rate at which somebody grows will vary based on personalities, perhaps their role, and there's still always progress. Because even if they thrive in monotony, the skill set is still going to grow. They're going to have more and more experiences. So even if there's a temptation to keep somebody stagnant in there, we want to challenge them even a little bit to continue to have that flow state. And my third tip for increasing happiness is how we talk about rewards and raises. So we want to communicate the meaning in the journey, not just the achievement. If we provide rewards solely based on the achievement, then we're creating a pattern where there's always an if-then as far as happiness and fulfillment in business. So we want to talk about that journey. To do this at its best, we want to verbalize how the strengths have worked them through the journey. So it's one added layer that you are valuable in this business, not just because of the performance that you've done, but how and why you've done it. So for this example, I think about, there's an example in a book by Tony Hsieh. It's called Delivering Happiness. And he talks about consulting, and he's sitting across from a business owner. And the business owner's like, man, I really want my team to collaborate more. I want them to just, there's no teamwork here. Everyone is so quiet all the time in the office. So behind the business owner is a chart of the sales team. And whoever reaches the end goal first gets a trip to Hawaii. Ooh, doesn't this, like I want to compete, right? That sounds awesome. And in that pattern, though, that's going to be a competition that's not necessarily going to communicate camaraderie. So it's being mindful of how we reward individuals and tying their individual strengths into it as much as possible. Okay. No. Okay, so with happiness, of course, managing stress is important. So the first tip for managing stress is to communicate opportunities. Every time you're in a conflict, there's an opportunity in it. For this example, I think about a customer complaint. Customer calls in, they're complaining. Instantly, we think about like Karens right now, right? Poor people named Karen. It's so awful. Poor Karens, okay? And there's this like label on it that they're being so rude, they're being so disrespectful. How awful of them to treat me that way. Okay, fair, we can focus on that. Or we can say, well, what's the opportunity here? Why did they call in? They didn't just complain to their friends. They called in for a reason. Maybe they've called in because they've been a customer for a long time. Maybe they've called in because our product has worked well for them in the past and it didn't meet that expectation today. There's an expectation there that we missed. So we have an opportunity to try to repair that. So we want to communicate the opportunity within the conflict. To do this at its best, I want you to think about how you can tie in their strengths. So perhaps that same customer service representative trains your other ones, and they do so well because they're patient, they communicate really well, they have all these strengths. So you can lead them using their strengths to handle these opportunities in a new, unique way. The second tip I have for managing stress is to unpack it. So for this idea, I don't want you to think about stress and running away from it. For this analogy, I have two briefcases, my go-to analogy for stress. On one hand, we're all carrying a positive briefcase. And your stakeholder in this experience is like, let's say an investor. And in their positive briefcase with your business, they're saying, oh, I'm so glad I chose this business because what your mission here matches my personal values. That's why I invested in it. And from that, I'm so thankful that I've made great friendships through this experience. On the other hand, though, we have our negative briefcase. It's all the stress that we all carry every day. And for this stakeholder in here, perhaps they just found out that a recent investment didn't go well. Perhaps they have personal issues coming up. Perhaps the last time you all met, they got some bad news. Maybe the numbers weren't quite what they had hoped. If your stakeholder's talking about the stress and you're like, oh my gosh, look at everything in your positive briefcase. You've had great friendships. You can trust me. We've worked together now for 10 years. This has been so smooth. What are you talking about? Then I'm leaving the whole negative briefcase to just feel heavy. They're just hanging on to it. So instead, I want you to unpack the stress. I want you to explore the negative briefcase to the level that's appropriate for your business. Not every business is going to be the same. We also don't want to run away from it. So yeah, you told me you made that bad investment. Like, dang, that sucks. Of course you're going to be worried about this when the numbers weren't good last month. Just touching on the negative briefcase, not running from it, is a great way to help your stakeholder release some of that stress. To do this at its best, I think I'm very honored in the work that I do because I see people manage their stress and come back to strengths all the time. So the more that I can unpack a negative briefcase, we as people are resilient, strong people. So when you can unpack a briefcase, naturally what happens is it's going to run its course and people will automatically go back to the positive briefcase. They're going to start exploring it and honoring it because that's important too. So it's a really beautiful process that we can all do as people. When the negative briefcase is explored, the weight is lightened, your stakeholder can automatically go back to that positive briefcase. And my last tip for managing stress is how you talk about money. While money is critical, of course, for any business, we got to keep the lights on, both in the business and in our homes. Unfortunately, though, business owners have a stigma of being greedy. In a poll from 2018, 26% of employees said, man, my boss is just in it for the money. He's power hungry. Even when doing research for this point, yes, I like to do the research side. I also like to Google stuff. What are people talking about? There are pages and pages of how to know if your boss is a narcissist. Somehow we're all being diagnosing different narcissists, right? It's what are they doing wrong? How are they treating you? It's managing and looking through all of their different behaviors. So unfortunately, we all have that stigma that we need to navigate. So to help you do that, we want to be mindful of how we talk about money. So when we do this, it's money as a resource and how we are going to use that resource. To do this at its best, it's adding one extra layer. Money is a resource. How are we going to use that resource and why? We're going to tie it back to the mission. I don't think this has to be a big disclosure all the time. It's adding one extra piece to the sentence. So perhaps we're increasing our Q2 sales because we want to put more money into marketing and advertising because we created this great new product and we want to get in front of new people. Not only will it help them, we're also going to get a lot of feedback. That's going to help us continue in our business. So it's the why that's important. One extra little piece to the sentence can help change how we talk about money. Is that just my angle? Okay, well, at least you can read the text. Okay, so a bonus tip for you is the utilization of questionnaires and surveys. Not only do they help keep your assumptions in check, but you can actually quantify the happiness ratio. If you're wondering where people are at, use the numbers from the questionnaire to find where your different stakeholders are. My suggestion is to ask questions about how their strengths meet their challenges. Again, the meaning in their behaviors is so important, tied to happiness. And also the future focus, that their values are also matching the business's mission. So I've created a questionnaire for you, an example. It's for download on my website under the resources tab if you'd like that. Oh, and to do this at its best, we want it to be anonymous. The reason for that is it will increase the likelihood of honesty. We also want to target specific stakeholder groups as much as possible. The smaller the group, the better, because you're going to have a lot of valuable information. And you should only do a questionnaire or survey if you're going to do some kind of follow-up. So communicating what you've learned from the questionnaires and what you're going to do about it. If you ask for all this feedback and it goes nowhere, your stakeholders are just going to end up being disappointed and have the opposite impact of what you're hoping for. So in conclusion, the happiness ratio is 20-1. And while that number seems high, my hope in this presentation is that, one, you have an action plan on how to get it. It's also, though, how we define happiness. That happiness isn't defined in those fleeting moments of bliss, but rather in finding meaning and purpose in what I'm doing today, the work that I do today, and what it's for in the future. All right, so we have about 10 minutes for questions. Yeah, Terry, right?
Yeah, so what prompted you to put this presentation together? And how is this part of your business?
Well, it's kind of like two separate goals. Okay. So as far as how it's tied to my business, I'm honored to work with the couples in my care. And I see their progress. It's just this beautiful, I'm so honored to see the growth. And I'm also limited by providing that service to those clients. So my hope in having presentations like this is that I can get in front of more of the community to provide more happiness, more resources to the community as a whole.
Oh, okay, yeah. I asked because it's kind of an unusual topic.
Oh.
And especially since you use the word stakeholders. If you were talking about couples, that would be a little more understandable, but the stakeholders opened it up to a bigger conversation. So
yeah, well, I love business, so that's why I mean 90% of my clients, last time I did the math, are business owners, at least one of the partners, and it's so fulfilling to see the work that people put into the community. And I just love talking business. So I can do that in therapy and with you all here. So you fulfill that need for me too.
Thank you.
Great question. Yeah. Thanks. What are the questions? Yeah.
I'm just curious. I feel like just our world in general, social media has moved so much towards the fleeting bliss moments.
So true.
So how do you feel like, in business or just society in general, we can help move the needle back towards it being more attached to meaning? Or even on socials, try to do more of that versus those fleeting moments.
gosh, it's so true. Because even as you're talking, I think about those social media posts of meaning, right? That it's like, wow, look at all this fulfilling work, and I'm showing you my like highlight reel of my life. Really good point. I think there's a piece of finding that purpose within the individual too. But as far as shifting it to a business perspective, the more that we can start to communicate and open the door to that conversation, I think we can automatically have people start to reflect on it themselves. So reflecting and sharing with your stakeholders your why. Why did you create your business? Why are you in the role that you're in? Why? How? What do you hope for? What do you hope for in a bigger picture? The more that we can start the conversation, I think we're going to start to inspire more and more people to reflect on their own values and mission as well.
So when you talked about surveys, I know anonymous is best. What's a good practice for small teams where, you know, when you're talking about qualitative data, you're going to know that Jeff wrote this because it's clearly how he talks.
Fair point. Fair point. So for smaller teams, my recommendation would be to take out a lot of like comment sections. I think comment sections automatically start to see our personalities a bit more. So I perhaps would do less questions where they can add personal ties and add in more like statistical number-based questions to help protect that. I think that would be my biggest suggestion. I think the second piece too is perhaps disclosure on that point. The more that we can have honest disclosure in saying, yeah, you know, we have a small team. I also want you to feel comfortable talking about any concerns that you may have or what you hope for with this business. So also making it okay that if there is a critique, that we know that we can handle it well as a team and it's not going to deter your role within the company. Any other questions? All right. Oh, go ahead, Terry.
Yeah, so just for clarifications, I did go to your website before this presentation, and I see that your website is focused more around couples
Yeah.
work. And so that's, I'm guessing, relationship type of work. But you also mentioned business. So do you do business relationship work as well? Or are you saying that most of your couples are business owners?
You just set me up for a great transition, so
Okay.
thank you.
Sure.
So I have two websites. One is for couples therapy, so that's the couples workshop here, where, I'm a therapist, so I provide the therapy.
Sure.
My new initiative is this like info@talksbyemily.com, because I do have this new hope of talking more to businesses, to our community as a whole, about all this valuable information I have about making change, about happiness, about conflict management.
I see, sure.
So so I do have two. This one's newer. So I don't know if there's less like reviews and stuff on it, so it might be a little bit more challenging to find at this point.
Okay.
But my hope is I have a lot of fulfillment in the work that I do. I also want to do more opportunities like this. So the way that you set me up very well is this QR code. It leads to my Google business listing. And my ask for today is that you leave me honest feedback. Not only will it help me grow, but it will also help communicate your experience today to the community at large.
Cool, thank you.
It's a great question. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it did,
Okay.
yes.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. Anything else for today? All right, well, thank you very much. You guys have been
Thank you.
great.